The stars stretched endlessly across the black void as the Terran Coalition vessel, Pathfinder, suddenly appeared in a flash of blue light. The massive ship had just finished its jump through hyperspace, arriving at the edge of a distant star system called Kepler 442. On the bridge, Captain Kim Soo-jin stood with her hands clasped behind her back, watching the main screen as it displayed the empty space around them. Her dark eyes moved quickly across the glowing displays that surrounded her command chair. Numbers and symbols flickered on the screens, showing information about the star system they had just entered. But something was wrong. The bridge felt too quiet, too tense. Everyone was waiting for news that hadn't come. "Captain," called out Park Hyun-woo from his position at the communications station. His voice carried worry that he tried to hide. "I'm still getting nothing from Scout Team Delta. No radio signals, no emergency beacons, nothing at all." Captain Kim frowned. Scout Team Delta was made up of 5 of their best people. They were tough, smart, and experienced. These were the kind of soldiers who could survive almost anything the galaxy threw at them. 3 weeks ago, they had been sent to this system to investigate strange energy readings that Coalition sensors had picked up from hundreds of light years away. "When was their last check-in?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. 4 days ago, Captain," Park replied, his fingers moving over his control panel as he tried different communication frequencies. They were supposed to report in every 12 hours. Their transponder signals went dead at exactly the same time as their last transmission. On the other side of the bridge, Lee Min-ho looked up from his tactical station. His job was to watch for threats and keep track of everything the ship's sensors could detect. His face was pale as he studied the readings on his screen. "Captain, I'm picking up debris," he said quietly. "It's at the coordinates where the scout team was supposed to be operating. The computer is analyzing it now, but..." He paused, not wanting to say what they were all thinking. "Show me," Captain Kim ordered. The main screen changed to display a detailed scan of the area ahead of them. There, orbiting around a huge gas giant planet, was a small rocky moon. It looked dead and lifeless, covered in gray dust and strange crystal formations. But what caught everyone's attention was the twisted wreckage scattered across its surface. "Take us in slowly," the captain said. "Full sensor sweeps. I want to know everything about that moon before we get too close." The Pathfinder moved forward, carefully, like a giant metal whale swimming through the darkness of space. As they got closer, the details became clearer and more frightening. The wreckage was definitely from their scout team's shuttle. The small, fast ship that had carried the 5 soldiers to this system was now scattered across a crystalline canyon in pieces. Science Officer Choi Ji-won worked frantically at her station, analyzing every bit of data the sensors collected. She was young but brilliant, one of the smartest people on the ship. Her hands shook slightly as she read the results. "Captain," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The shuttle's hull has been completely breached, but there are no impact craters, no signs of an explosion from inside. Something cut through the metal like it was paper." "What about the crew?" Captain Kim asked, though she was afraid of the answer. "No bodies, Captain. No equipment either. The entire interior has been cleaned out. It's like someone took everything, organic, and just removed it." The bridge fell silent except for the quiet humming of the ship's systems. Everyone stared at the main screen, looking at the wreckage of their friend's ship. But there was something else that made the scene even more disturbing. "Captain, look at these burn patterns," Lee Min-ho said, pointing to his display. "They're all around the crash site, burned into the rock itself." The patterns were unlike anything any of them had ever seen. They were geometric shapes, perfect, circles and triangles and other designs that seemed to follow some kind of mathematical pattern. But they were huge, each one the size of a building, carved deep into the crystalline rock of the moon's surface. "Run those patterns through our weapons database," Captain Kim ordered. "I want to know what kind of weapon could do that." Choi Ji-won's fingers flew over her controls as she searched through thousands of known weapon signatures. Minutes passed. Then she looked up with fear in her eyes. "Nothing, Captain. These patterns don't match any weapon system in our database. Not human, not from any of the alien species we've encountered. This is something completely new. Captain. Kim stared at the screen, watching the strange burn patterns that surrounded the wreckage of the scout shuttle. Somewhere down there, 5 brave soldiers had met something that was beyond their understanding. Something that had taken them without leaving a trace. Maintain distance, she ordered. Begin detailed scans of the entire moon. If our people are down there, we're going to find them. And if something else is down there... She paused, her jaw tightening with determination. Then we're going to find that too. The Pathfinder. Hung in space above the mysterious moon, its sensors reaching out like invisible fingers, searching for answers in a place where 5 humans had vanished without a trace. The black box from the crashed shuttle sat on the table, in the Pathfinder's main laboratory like a small metal coffin. Captain Kim Soo-jin watched as her technical team carefully extracted the damaged data storage unit from the wreckage they had brought aboard. The device had been badly damaged in the crash, but their computer experts were slowly pulling information from its memory banks. "We're getting something, Captain," said Technical Officer Yoon Jae-sung, his eyes focused on the glowing screen in front of him. Audio recordings from inside the shuttle. They recorded everything that happened during their mission. Captain Kim nodded grimly. "Play it back. Let's find out what happened to our people." The speakers crackled with static, and then a familiar voice filled the room. It was Han So-young, the team's communications specialist. She had been one of the best soldiers in the coalition, trained to handle any situation. Her voice sounded excited and curious as the recording began. "Mission log, day 15. So-young's voice said through the static. "We've found something incredible down here. There's a structure buried deep beneath the moon's surface. It's not like anything we've ever seen before. The walls seem to be made of some kind of crystal, and they're covered in symbols that keep changing as we watch them." The captain listened carefully as So-young described their discovery. The scout team had been exploring the moon for 2 weeks, when their ground-penetrating radar detected something massive underneath the rocky surface. They had found an entrance, a dark opening that led down into tunnels that stretched for miles in every direction. "The technology down here is beyond our understanding," So-young continued in the recording. "Young Do-hyun thinks the tunnels extend for hundreds of miles underground. The walls seem to phase in and out of normal space. Sometimes you can touch them, sometimes your hand passes right through them, like they're not really there." Captain Kim felt a chill run down her spine. She had heard reports of alien technology that could manipulate space and time, but she had never seen it herself. The recording continued, and So-young's voice began to sound more worried. "Day 17. We've gone deeper into the structure. Kim Tae-min says his sensors are picking up movement ahead of us, but we can't see anything. The air down here feels different, like it's charged with electricity. Yang Subin's equipment keeps malfunctioning." The technical officer adjusted the controls, trying to clean up the audio signal. The next part of the recording was harder to understand, filled with strange background noises that sounded almost like music, but not quite. "Day 18. We've encountered them." So-young's voice was now tight with fear. "They call themselves something that our translators can't convert. But we're calling them the architects. They're not like any life form we've studied. They float through the air, these geometric shapes that seem to exist in multiple dimensions at once." Captain Kim leaned forward. This was the first description they had of whatever had taken the scout team. "The architects don't communicate with words," the recording continued. "They touch your mind directly. Young Do-hyun tried to make contact with them, and now he's different. He stands perfectly still for hours, staring at the walls. When he speaks, it's not his voice anymore." The recording became more fragmented after that. There were long periods of static, interrupted by brief moments of clear audio. So-young's voice became more desperate with each entry. "They're harvesting us," she whispered in one fragment. "That's the only way I can describe it. They take our consciousness, our thoughts, our memories, and they put them into these crystal formations that power their machines. Kim Tae-min is gone. Yang Soo-bin is gone. They're not dead. They're trapped inside the crystals, aware but unable to move or speak." Captain Kim closed her eyes, trying not to imagine what her soldiers had gone through in their final hours. The recording continued with So Young describing how the architects could apparently exist partially outside normal physics, appearing and disappearing at will, moving through solid walls as if they weren't there. "I'm the last one," So Young's voice said in what was clearly her final recording. "Young Do-hyun is still alive, but he's not Young Do-hyun anymore. He's become part of their network somehow. The architects are coming for me now. I can feel them in my mind trying to get inside." There was a long pause, filled only with static and strange alien sounds in the background. "I'm activating the emergency beacon." So Young continued, her voice steadier now as if she had made some kind of decision. "But I'm not calling for rescue. If anyone finds this recording, tell Coalition Command that we don't negotiate with things that harvest minds." The audio became chaotic after that. There were sounds of movement, alien voices that didn't sound like voices at all, and then So Young screaming. But her screams were cut short, ending abruptly in a way that made everyone in the laboratory shiver. "That's all we can recover, Captain," said the technical officer quietly. "The rest of the data is too corrupted." Captain Kim stared at the black box, understanding now what had happened to Scout Team Delta. They had discovered something ancient and terrible, something that fed on consciousness itself. And somewhere in those dark tunnels beneath the moon, 4 of her best soldiers were trapped in crystal prisons, aware but helpless. But So Young had activated something before the end, something that wasn't a call for help. The computer technicians aboard the Pathfinder worked through the night, slowly piecing together the final data transmission that So Young had sent before she disappeared. What they found shocked everyone who saw it. Captain Kim Soo-jin stood in the data analysis room staring at the screens that showed exactly what So Young had uploaded in her last moments. "Captain, this doesn't make sense," said data analyst Oh Min-seo, her fingers pointing at the flowing lines of code on her monitor. She didn't send a distress signal or a call for help. Instead, she uploaded our entire military database directly into the alien network. Captain Kim frowned as she read through the transmission logs. The amount of information was staggering. So Young had somehow managed to access and transmit the complete specifications of every weapon system the human military had ever developed. Tank designs, spacecraft weapons, nuclear technology, biological warfare tactics, everything. She gave them our psychological warfare manuals too, added Chief Analyst Bae Jung-min from his workstation. Combat doctrine, interrogation techniques, propaganda methods, even historical records of every major war humanity has ever fought. The room fell silent as everyone tried to understand what So Young had done. It seemed like she had handed over everything that could help an enemy defeat humanity. But Captain Kim knew So Young too well. She had been one of the smartest tactical minds in the coalition. There had to be a reason. "Pull up her personal files," Captain Kim ordered. "I want to see her psychological evaluation reports and her military training records." As the information appeared on the main screen, a pattern began to emerge. So Young had specialized in what the military called unconventional warfare. She was an expert in turning weakness into strength, in using an enemy's advantages against them. Her training records showed that she had studied every major military defeat in human history, not to avoid making the same mistakes, but to understand how those defeats had eventually led to victory. She was setting a trap, Captain Kim realized, her eyes widening as she understood. "Look at what she uploaded. It's not just our weapons and tactics. It's our entire history of fighting ourselves." Technical Officer Yoon Jae-sung looked confused. "I don't understand, Captain. How is that supposed to help us?" Captain Kim turned to address the entire team. "Think about it. These architects have been feeding on other species for who knows how long. They study their prey, learn their weaknesses, and then harvest their consciousness. But every species they've encountered before was probably peaceful, or at least fought simple wars against external enemies." She walked over to the display showing human military history. Thousands of years of warfare scrolled past on the screen. Wars between tribes, between nations, between ideologies. Humans fighting humans with increasing sophistication and brutality. "Humans are different," she continued. "We've spent our entire history fighting against enemies who think exactly like us. Every weapon we've developed, every strategy we've created, every psychological trick we've learned, all of it came from fighting other humans who were just as smart and just as desperate as we were. The room began to buzz with understanding. Analyst Omincio spoke up first. So when the architects tried to analyze our combat doctrine, they weren't just learning about human weapons. They were learning about human psychology. Exactly, Captain Kim nodded. And human psychology is built around one core principle that no other species has developed to our level. We never, ever give up. We fight when we're outnumbered. We fight when we're outgunned. We fight when there's no hope of winning, just to make sure the enemy pays a price for victory. Chief Analyst Bai Jung-min was studying another data stream. Captain, there's more. The transmission included detailed records of what we call spite warfare. Historical. Examples of humans who chose to destroy everything rather than surrender. Cities that burned themselves rather than be captured. Soldiers who used their last breath to take enemies with them. Captain Kim felt a grim smile cross her face. So Young understood something that the architects couldn't. They evolved to feed on species that wanted to survive, but humans are the species that learned to weaponize their own destruction. The data analysis continued throughout the night, revealing the full scope of So Young's strategy. She hadn't just uploaded military information. She had included every example she could find of humans turning hopeless situations into victories through sheer stubborn refusal to accept defeat. "Look at this," called out Technician Park Dalsu from his station. She included psychological profiles of human prisoners of war, not just how they resist interrogation, but how they turn the interrogation process itself into a weapon against their captors. The picture became clearer with each new piece of data they recovered. So Young had realized that the architects made one crucial mistake when they tried to harvest human consciousness. They assumed that a trapped mind would behave like every other species they had encountered, gradually giving up hope and accepting absorption into their network. But human minds didn't work that way. Human minds had been shaped by millions of years of competition against other human minds. They were designed to find weaknesses in any system, to exploit any advantage, to turn any situation into a weapon. "She turned herself into a virus, Captain," Kim said quietly, finally understanding the full scope of So Young's sacrifice. She let them absorb her consciousness, but she made sure that her consciousness was armed with every dirty trick humanity had ever learned about psychological warfare. Inside the architect network, So Young wasn't just fighting for her own survival. She was teaching an ancient alien intelligence what it meant to face an enemy that had learned to be more dangerous when trapped than when free. The Pathfinder had been traveling back toward Coalition space for 3 days when the first strange signals began reaching their communications array. Officer Park Hyun-woo was monitoring the long-range sensors when his equipment suddenly came alive with activity from the direction they had just left. Captain Kim to the bridge immediately. He called over the ship's communication system, his voice tight with excitement and confusion. Captain Kim Soo-jin arrived within minutes, still adjusting her uniform as she stepped onto the bridge. "What's the situation, Park?" "Captain, we're picking up massive energy discharges from the Kepler 442 system," Park said, his hands moving quickly over his controls. "The readings are off the scale. Something big is happening back there." The main screen flickered to life, showing a long-range view of the system they had left behind. Even from this distance, they could see flashes of light erupting from the small moon where they had found the crashed shuttle. The energy readings were unlike anything in their database. "It looks like the entire underground structure is having some kind of meltdown," reported Science Officer Choi Ji-won from her station. "The energy signatures match the alien technology we detected, but they're becoming unstable." Captain Kim stared at the screen, wondering what could cause such massive destruction. Then her communication board lit up with incoming signals from across the sector. "Captain, we're receiving transmissions," Park said, his voice filled with amazement. "Not just from the alien structure, but from everywhere. Every frequency, every communication channel is being flooded with the same message." "Put it on speakers," Captain Kim ordered. the bridge filled with a voice that chilled everyone who heard it. It wasn't quite human, but it wasn't entirely alien either. The words came through in perfect Korean, then switched to English, then to dozens of other languages that the crew recognized. "Humans are the species that taught war to itself," the voice said, repeating the message over and over in different languages. "Do not hunt what refuses to be prey. Do not hunt what refuses to be prey." Officer Lee Min-ho looked up from his tactical station with wide eyes. "Captain, that sounds like So Young's voice, but different somehow. Like it's been changed." The transmission continued for several minutes, broadcasting the same warning in every known language across 50 light-years of space. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the signal cut off. The energy readings from the distant moon spiked one final time and then went completely dark. "The entire structure just went offline," Choi Ji-won reported quietly. "Whatever was down there, it's not functioning anymore." Captain Kim felt a mixture of pride and sadness as she began to understand what had happened. So Young had done something that no one thought was possible. She had found a way to fight back from inside the alien network. Over the following hours, reports began flooding their communication system from ships and stations across the sector. The story they told was remarkable and terrifying at the same time. The Grichton pirate fleet, which had been terrorizing merchant ships near the Outer Rim, had suddenly stopped all their operations and fled toward unknown space. Their last transmission had been a single word repeated over and over: humans. The Zilani slave traders, who had been capturing sentient beings from primitive worlds for decades, had abandoned their entire operation. Their slave ships were found drifting empty in space, with signs that the crews had fled in panic. Most shocking of all were reports from the ancient Vorthak Empire. The Vorthak were an old and powerful species that had dominated their region of space for thousands of years. They were known for their practice of conquering younger civilizations and absorbing them into their empire. But now, Vorthak ships were retreating from any system where human vessels had been detected. "Captain, we're getting a priority message from Coalition Command," Park announced. "Admiral Chen wants a full report on what happened in the Kepler 442 system." As Captain Kim prepared her report, she began to piece together what So Young had accomplished. The young communications specialist hadn't just uploaded human military data to the alien network. She had turned herself into a weapon, a virus that could spread through any connected system. The architects had made a fatal mistake when they tried to absorb So Young's consciousness. They had evolved to process the minds of species that fought simple wars against external enemies. But human consciousness was different. It was shaped by thousands of years of fighting against other humans, learning to exploit psychological weaknesses and turn any disadvantage into an advantage. When So Young's mind entered their network, it didn't just resist absorption. It actively fought back, using every psychological warfare technique that humans had developed over millennia of conflict. The virus she had become spread through their collective consciousness, teaching them what it meant to face an enemy that refused to be broken. The architects had tried to purge So Young's consciousness from their network, but each attempt only made the virus stronger. Her mental patterns had been designed by evolution and training to find weaknesses in any system and exploit them. The more they fought against her, the more she learned about their network and how to damage it. In the end, the ancient alien intelligence had destroyed itself rather than continue to host a consciousness that turned their own collective mind into a weapon against them. So Young's final act of defiance had not only freed her trapped teammates, but had sent a message across the galaxy that would protect humanity for generations to come. The species that had learned to wage war against itself was not prey to be hunted. 6 months had passed since the incident at Kepler 442, and the reports reaching Coalition Command were unlike anything in recorded galactic history. Captain Kim Soo-jin sat in the briefing room aboard the flagship Aurora, reading through intelligence reports that seemed almost too incredible to believe. "The Black Star pirates surrendered their entire fleet yesterday," reported Intelligence Officer Nam Ki-woo, sliding a datapad across the table. 57 ships, including their flagship. They didn't even wait for our patrol vessels to get within weapons range. As soon as they detected human energy signatures, they powered down their weapons and broadcast surrender codes. Captain Kim shook her head in amazement. The Black Star pirates had been terrorizing trade routes for over a decade. They were known for fighting to the death rather than face imprisonment. Yet here they were, giving up without firing a single shot. "What about the Mordek slave rings?" she asked. "Gone," replied Commander Shin Dong-hyuk from across the table. "Every single slave trading operation that used to operate near human space has shut down completely. We found 17 abandoned slave ships drifting in the Outer Rim, still full of captives. The crews just left. No distress signals, no explanation. They just ran." The most shocking reports came from the frontier regions, where humanity had been slowly expanding into unexplored space. Ancient alien civilizations that had dominated their territories for thousands of years were now retreating whenever human ships appeared. Species that had never shown fear of anything were fleeing at the first sign of human presence. "Admiral, we need to return to Kepler 442, Captain Kim said during her meeting with Coalition Command. "We need to understand exactly what happened there, and we need to document it properly." 3 weeks later, the Pathfinder dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442 system once again. But this time, Captain Kim brought a full expedition team with her. Scientists, archaeologists, military specialists, and historians all came to study what had become the most important site in human space. The crystalline moon looked different now. Where before there had been strange energy readings and mysterious alien activity, now there was only silence. The massive underground structure that had once housed the architects was completely dead, its power systems shut down forever. "Readings show the entire facility is stable but inactive," reported Chief Engineer Ko Sung-min as their shuttle descended toward the moon's surface. "Whatever happened down there, it's over now." The expedition team entered the alien tunnels through the same entrance that Scout Team Delta had used months earlier, but where the original team had found active alien technology and dangerous geometric entities, the new team found only empty corridors filled with the remains of destroyed machinery. The crystalline walls that had once phased in and out of normal space-time were now solid and lifeless. The complex geometric patterns that had covered every surface were cracked and broken. It was as if the entire structure had turned to stone. "The crystal matrices are all shattered," observed lead scientist Dr. Yu Mi-jin as she examined the remains of what had once been the architect's consciousness storage system. These formations once held the absorbed minds of thousands of beings from dozens of different species. Now they're just broken crystal. As they moved deeper into the complex, they began to find evidence of the battle that had taken place within the alien network. Walls showed signs of some kind of internal explosion, not physical but mental, as if the structure's own consciousness had torn itself apart from within. Finally, at the very center of the complex, they found what they had come looking for. In a large chamber that had once housed the core of the architect network, words were carved deep into the crystalline wall. The letters were crude but clear, obviously carved by hand with some kind of improvised tool. "One human is worth 1,000 monsters. Remember that." The words were signed with So Young's name and her military identification number. The expedition team stood in silence as they read the message. Captain Kim felt tears forming in her eyes as she imagined So Young in her final moments, trapped within an alien network but still fighting, still refusing to give up, still finding a way to leave a message for those who would come after her. "How did she manage to carve this?" asked archaeologist Lee Sun-woo. "She was absorbed into their network. She shouldn't have had any physical form." Dr. Yu studied the wall carefully. "The carving was made from the inside," she said quietly. "Somehow she managed to take control of part of their system and use it to leave us this message." Back aboard the Pathfinder. That evening, Captain Kim sat in her quarters writing her final report on the Kepler 442 incident. She had spent hours interviewing the scientists and studying their findings, trying to understand the full scope of what So Young had accomplished. The evidence was clear. So Young hadn't just destroyed the architect network through some kind of mental virus. She had fundamentally changed how the galaxy viewed humanity. Her consciousness, shaped by thousands of years of human warfare and psychological conditioning, had been too dangerous for the alien network to contain. The message had spread far beyond the Kepler 442 system. Every species that had ever considered humans as potential prey now understood a simple truth. Humans were not a species that could be safely hunted. They were the species that had learned to turn defeat into victory, to make victory too costly for their enemies to enjoy. In her final log entry, Captain Kim wrote, "Han So-young taught the galaxy that humans are the species that refuses to be consumed quietly. We may not be the strongest or the smartest, but we are the ones who will burn everything down rather than submit. Sometimes that is the most dangerous weapon of all."